So on this season of Love is Blind, we have a sprinkle babe in Brittany. And you know what? I love her. I stan her. It's a breath of fresh air. But unfortunately, Project Rich Housewife did not work out for my girl. But I think that was for the best because Leo was giving very much psychopath. Like, of course, the richest man on the show is giving psychopath vibes. The first thing I loved about her is how she just said right off the bat that she doesn't cook. Like, one guy asked her what's the last thing she cooked. She said, I couldn't tell you. A smoothie. Period. I know that's fucking right. And personally, it's my pet peeve when men ask me if I can cook. My go-to answer is I prefer to try new restaurants. And that is the truth. In the last 6 months, I've cooked myself 2 meals. I personally hate the idea of performing servitude to a man. Because when they ask you what can you cook, that's what they're testing to see. How servient you are. How domesticated you are. And I see some people say, oh, well, how can she want to be like a traditional housewife, but she doesn't cook? Rich people barely cook. Rich people, they eat out or they have a private chef. So imagine marrying a millionaire and they have the budget to outsource all the domestic tasks, but they insist on you doing it. Would you not think that's a bit strange? Because to me, that's giving slavery kink. Like, you have a kink for seeing me on my hands and knees. Now, this is no disrespect for the girlies who like cooking for their man, but I will not be participating. And honestly, men are just so shameless these days. You can't be telling them your skills because if you say you can cook, they will start asking you to come around and cook for them. But in terms of her other dating tactics on the show, I personally feel like she dragged this thing out with Leo. I feel like it was very clear from a certain point that Leo was not going to make a good husband. And it kind of seemed like she was kind of sticking around because he's rich. I mean, that was an obvious incentive there. I feel like she did not make that a secret. But in my opinion, Leo's cons outweighed the pros. And there wasn't really many pros. The only pro that he had was that he had money. And ironically, Leo says, girls only want me for my money. I'm scared that people only want me for my money. That's because that's literally the only thing you're offering. Like, personality, boring. Behavior, questionable. Leo is definitely giving you go on a couple dates with him, see what you can get out of the situation and then dip. It's definitely not giving marry this person. So obviously Leo was the only rich person on this show. So he was the only person Brittany was pursuing. She very heavily hinted that she didn't want a 50-50 relationship. She basically wanted to be taken care of 100% like in her last relationship. And she was hinting heavy. And Leo was dodging all those hints. Like, she kept whining on and on saying, my hair is so expensive, this is so expensive, women spend more, women do this, women do that, women do that, women do that. Personally, I'm not a fan of materialistic people who feel like they have to justify why they're materialistic because it comes across whiny and a little bit desperate. I just feel like it's better to be upfront and just say, look, I'm materialistic. I'm looking for somebody who's going to indulge in my materialism. Like, I don't feel like you need to list that your foundation is this much, your this is this much, your this is this much. The amount of entitlement and audacity that men have, it's time to match the energy. Even if your makeup is £1 from Primark, go out there and be your best materialistic self. So for me, when she was doing all that listing and whining and it was crickets from Leo, that was a bit embarrassing. And that's when I was like, I'm not sure if he's your target market. Once she was a bit more explicit, Leo did respond and basically saying that he's okay paying for, say, most things, but he would feel comfortable if she contributed something just to make it seem, in his words, that they were both invested. And I feel like this is when she should have checked out because he's one of those. He's one of those rich people who advertise their riches, advertise that they went to this school, they've traveled to this country. They emphasize how blessed they are to be this well off, to never have worried about money. But for the wife, the person they want to spend the rest of their life with, the person they want as the mother of their children, they don't want to share this blessing entirely. They don't think that their whole wife is worthy of the blessing that has been bestowed upon them, even though it's possible for them to give them that blessing. Then he goes on to say, if they were to get divorced, she needs to understand that his wealth would belong to my children. He even said my children, not even our children. My children, my. So this is a very typical selfish rich person. And I feel like a lot of them are. Or when they do give you things, it's very much conditional. It's very much given, I will pay for the 5-star hotel that's all inclusive, so long as we're in it together and you're fucking me all night. I will pay for the diamond earrings because I want all of my friends to see how much money I've spent on my wife. But then soon a pattern will emerge when it's time to pay for things that are solely about you. They're dragging their feet. Excuses are being made. That's very much the type of rich that Leo gives. And I feel like that's a common theme with people who come from generational wealth. Like in general, working class people tend to be more generous than rich people. Or at the very least, a rich person with a working class background will probably be more generous than somebody who has come from generational wealth. Brittany knows that she's looking for a generous rich man that's basically going to give her everything that she asked for. And it's giving very much conditional with Leo. So I feel like at this point, she should have had a comprehensive conversation about that. But she decided to backpedal, and I feel like she was probably thinking in her head, I'm going to try and make this work. And I think maybe she was going to try and subtly manipulate him into paying for whatever she wants down the line. And I think the method that she was going to use was guilt tripping. Because Leo was definitely taking the piss with this whole love triangle thing. It's very clear that Hannah was his number one because he was onto Brittany. He knew that she was smarter than she was letting on. And he also knew that she was going to be harder to manipulate than Hannah. That's why Hannah was his number one. Leo did wildly disrespectful things to Brittany. And she kept letting them slide. Like the whole surprise thing, with the surprise being him getting her to pick her ring, whilst also doing the same thing to Hannah and letting Brittany know that he's doing the same thing to Hannah. Him saying that both Brittany and Hannah were his number ones. And basically just stringing her along the whole time. And basically the fact that it was just very obvious that she was second pick. Like he only proposed to her because Hannah rejected him and went off with Nick, and he didn't want to leave the pod without a fiance because he would probably wanted to impress his friends back home. Now, during the proposal, she reads out this letter about how she's so hurt, about the way that he's treated her, and Leo now knows that he has a bad reputation in the pods. And Brittany knows that Leo knows that he's got a bad reputation. So I feel like she was basically going to guilt trip him because of the bad treatment and use this guilt trip into basically getting her way, getting him to pay for all the things that she wants to pay, getting a more favourable prenup. I suspect that was her plan. But what do you guys think? Do you think manipulation was her plan to get Leo to bend to her will? Or do you feel like she was just desperate to marry a rich man and Leo will do? Ultimately, in their first meet, the cracks were already starting to show. It was awkward as fuck. And Leo is basically just treating Brittany like his personal doll. Like, I think he gave her like over 100 kisses during that segment. And she's just basically in his arms, limp. And he don't give a fuck. And he's asking her, do you love me? And all of these things. And she's not saying anything because she clearly doesn't. And I feel like at this point she was thinking, this guy's too much work. And I feel like that's when she dipped because they broke up immediately after. But why do you think they broke up? Let me know your thoughts.